It's Wednesday, October 7th, 2015, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by one of our mentors, Ian Moulton, Product Manager at TouchTunes Interactive Networks, and he's going to lead a talk on conducting user research. So for those of you joining us for the first time today, let me just briefly explain the format. Along the bottom of your screen here, you've got mentors and mentees within the current session of the Product Mentor program. The Product Mentor is all about helping product people kind of up their game, take it to the next level. We pair a product management expert with another product manager, so whether it's someone new to the field or someone looking to take their skills to that next level. We pair them together one-on-one for 6 months, and one of the things that the mentors do to really kind of give back to the people in the session and really the larger product management community is to do these live streams. So we hope you enjoy them and learn a lot from them, and I know a lot of people have commented that they do. So Ian will be leading the talk, and Jeremy Horn, the product guy, will be moderating. But let me just quickly do introductions for those on the bottom. I think the person in blue is currently unavailable, so we'll just do quick intros from Ladislav and Ian before we start the presentation. Ladislav?
Hi everyone, I'm Ladislav. I'm a product consultant currently at OComp in London, and I'm also the group mentor at Product Mentor. Thanks.
And Ian?
Yeah, hi, Ian Moulton, product manager at TouchTunes. I'm also a mentor in the program, working with Michael Enriquez, as a mentee, and excited to share some thoughts today.
Excellent. And so for those of you joining us, you can always ask questions, and the questions will be passed on into Ian in fairly real time as I moderate them. And to do that, you just go to theproductmentor.com/live, where you can watch the live video and post your questions at the bottom of the screen. Post the questions in. As they come in, I said, they will be passed along to Ian at the next available moment, so in a near real-time sort of manner. And session 4 is starting on November 1st, so we're definitely looking for a lot more mentors for that session. We have a few hundred mentees all ready to go. So if you'd like to be a mentor, and that we can always use a lot of from anywhere in the world, please join. You just go to theproductmentor.com and sign up to be a mentor, and I'm in touch with you pretty quickly from there. And with that said, let me hand it over to you, Ian, to take it away with your talk.
Excellent. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. As Jeremy noted, my name's Ian Moulton, and I'm a mentor in the product mentorship program, working with a mentee. I have titled the presentation today "Building Your User Research Toolkit," and the goal for today is really to share a little bit about how I see user research and hopefully help you. People who are interested in user research and building up some skills, building up, as I say, a toolkit to help you in the areas of user research. I'll start out a little bit about myself. I've been building products for about 12 years. 9 years of that have been in formal product management roles. The Associated Press onwards has basically been, or product has been in my title. 5 different organizations altogether where I've been doing product management. A lot of different organizations I've worked for, a lot of different types of organizations. Broadcast Interactive Media is what BIM is at the top. And that was a startup. I was like the 3rd employee. It built up to 60 people. And I also worked for the Associated Press, which actually is a non-profit cooperative, which not a lot of people are necessarily aware of. A pretty large company around the world. You can see the disparity between the founding dates. AP was started before radio existed. I also worked for TV Guide, which is very much TV Guide Online, which is basically very much a digital media operation, standalone, independent from other properties like the magazine or the TV network you might be familiar with, but very much a digital, wholly digital entity. I also worked for a startup, Unigo. It's a college guide, and they have some other services as well. Very different situation. About seven employees all in one room. Currently at TouchTunes, it's sort of a hybrid between a legacy business, which is a digital jukebox business, and it's basically a legacy business with some startups within it, about 250 employees. I made a note here. We're going to come back to it a little bit later, but with the exception of TV Guide and Unigo, really, I've been dealing with distributed teams. I made a note not just of where the company has offices, which actually is more than what you see here, but where the technology teams and the product teams are based, and that's distributed, and that's, I think, a very much a reality for a lot of folks who are doing product management. And one of the things I want to note is that user research is actually a great opportunity to bring people together and really rally around the product and really defining what it is and making sure it addresses the users. It's a great, actually, sort of motivational aspect to it. So Broadcast Interactive and the Associated Press are the first two bullet points. I was working on consumer web, news websites, video players, and then the back end tools that support those front end experiences. At TV Guide, just consumer mobile, so it's just working on mobile applications, which is really probably the simplest ecosystem I've worked on, where it's basically just our users and us. Other things are a little more complicated. At Unigo, we had to build a college guide, unigo.com, and also had a service that plugged into websites, the plug and play expert network. And in that situation, you have a lot of different types of users, not just different types of users using the front end, but then also people using the back end to look at statistics and serve as experts, things like that. So, but by far the most complicated ecosystem that I've worked on has been at TouchTunes, where we build jukeboxes and sell them to operators who then get the jukebox into a venue where you deal with not only the owner of the venue, but also the bartenders, and eventually the end consumer who basically goes up to the jukebox and experiences it. And then also we have users of a mobile app that does basically everything that the jukebox does. So a very complicated ecosystem. My responsibility is the digital jukeboxes that we have out there, the user experience for that, and then the business web tools that support the management of the jukeboxes. We have about 60,000 jukeboxes across the country, 70,000 if you include our global presence. But I'm a product manager, so that also sums me up in two words. Take this for what it is. And it's not a job description that's necessarily well understood. People have different perspectives on it, and I definitely can relate to both Christopher Reeve and the chicken who's running around with his head cut off. So inspiration for this lecture is probably too strong a word, but lecture for the inspiration for this talk is basically this slide outlines a lot of reasons you might not want to be a PM. If you like sleep and you don't like stress and you want to work on one team, that's not going to be a reality for you. You're going to be working with a lot of different departments in your organization. You're going to be dealing with engineers. One of the pain points here is that is the idea that if you like to know what to do and get it done, that product management isn't for you. And what I would like to do, somewhat an ambitious goal, is basically make user research, which for me was a little bit intimidating, have you give a little bit of understanding of what it's about to make it a little bit easier to know what to do when it comes to user research. I'm going to jump into some statistics about product managers. This is from a survey of about 100 product managers. You can see the demographics breaking down here. I don't have the detail. I don't think it was gathered, but I imagine the graduate degree is, in many cases, an MBA. Myself, I'm an econ major, so I guess I'm kind of in the minority here. Computer science, I'm surprised to see 10%. If you read job descriptions particularly in the West Coast, for me, when I'm looking at product management opportunities, computer science is a requirement for jobs at Google and other places like that. Not surprised to see business as a major, and this gender breakdown resonates with what I've seen in my experience. Just again, with going through some of these demographics, if you're 0 to 3 years of experience in product management, you're actually in the majority. I think that's sort of a heartening statistic for people who are new to product management. And as Jeremy always is emphasizing, this group, the product group and the product mentor group, both are not focused exclusively on digital, and there are a lot of people who are working on physical products, working on services. It's also interesting to see the revenue breakdown. I'm surprised to see some pretty large organizations represented. I've definitely worked, in the gray and the blue areas. I work in the blue area now in terms of the revenue for the organization I work with. Really, you're not alone if you're working in a big organization or a small one. For me, I'm in the dark blue here when it comes to the number of products. I have over 5 products that I manage, which I think is too many. And I think, for me, these challenges resonate: lack of resources, meeting deadlines, unclear internal processes. So I think when you see this, it makes you feel a little bit less alone when it comes to the challenges that you face day to day. And for me, in this survey question here, you're only able to pick one answer, and I would go with the majority as well: a better product strategy. The trick being here that internal processes, which stands out in challenges and products and better product strategy in terms of what people want, in some cases that's really our responsibility as well, or at least partially our responsibility to inform the process and to guide the process. So it's a two-way street, and it's definitely it's never a dull moment in product management. This survey went on to take a look at some things related to user research, and it's just part of the things that we do every day. It's good to see that people are spending quite a bit of time talking to customers. You're I think only able to choose one answer for this one on the right here in terms of your responses. I would say that ongoing is the right answer when it comes to conducting user research, though upfront is also a really great answer, because you really do want to be doing it as early as possible before you've defined the product, once you have a rough sense of it, and then when you're in the design phase. Definitely good to see that people see it that way, see the importance of user research and are engaged in that. So what is user research? There's a good quote here: "Know thy user and you are not thy user." My perspective is that you are at most one persona. We'll talk about personas a little bit later in terms of the user base of your product, but you're too close to the product from day one. You're too close to the product to actually represent as a user. For me, I'll remember this moment for a long time. When I first came into TouchTunes, I had not used the product very much, and before I really even spent time talking to sales and other people in the organization and things like that, I set aside quite a bit of time to just use the product for the first time, so to speak. And I took a lot of notes, because it really, from that day on, that ship had sailed. I was no longer a user. I was way too close to the product to really weigh in as someone who is representative in terms of not knowing how everything works. I also harkened back to several months before I started working at TouchTunes. When I used the TouchTunes jukebox, I remember seeing something in the UI, a label of a button. It was the plain X button. I had no idea what that meant, and we subsequently changed that label, but I hold on to that as basically a reminder that I don't know anything. That's overstating it a little bit, but you really don't know what people are thinking when they're going through, and you can very easily get into a state where you're assuming that you do, and that really is the danger, and that's why really user research is so important. So what is the goal of user research? This slide was actually in last week's presentation. It actually goes back to the 60s. It goes back to the 1960s, related, not this cartoon, but earlier versions. And it really goes back to project management. And this is obviously a problem that's not going anywhere. This will be in presentations 40 or 50 years from now. And really what this slide, what I take away from it is that no matter how great a rope swing you make, if you want to call this one with a plank and wood a rope swing, if it's not a tire swing, which is what the customer actually wanted, you're going to fail, and no matter how fancy you make it. So that really is the risk, and really is the opportunity that you can tap into by doing user research. The other goal, of course, is to advance our careers. That's going to be best done by building a successful product and moving your way up. I thought this slide was interesting because it actually has us basically, us product managers, on a fairly ambitious path to being a senior vice president, general manager, working as a CEO. Myself, I'm currently, I would say, in between the PM and the senior PM. I don't have P&L responsibility, but I do own the product features. And as much as possible, I try to own the process. But this evolution is something to aspire to, and I think learning user research and mastering it for your product is an important step along the way. So what is user research? It's an investigation. It's feedback. The goal is to get context and insight, ideally that's, as they say on this slide here, actionable and testable. But really, it's not the users saying, I want a tire swing. It's really to inform and inspire you to come up with the idea that syncs with what they value, with what they find interesting, what they find fun, what is going to really solve the problems that they have. So it's really still on you to solve the problems, but it's user research that really gives you an understanding of what is of importance to the users. There's a lot of different methods. I'm going to go through some today. They run the spectrum from being more quantitative and data-driven to being more qualitative. And also you can get sort of the attitude of your user, and you can actually see what they're doing as you move up from attitudinal to behavioral. Chronology doesn't neatly map against this graph. So you really have to find the methods you want to use along the way that make sense during the process. And the methods really are going to vary very widely based on the product that you're working on. So building your toolkit. This is really what we're hoping to do today. And my advice in starting out is to basically establish a baseline. And that's something that we've talked about in earlier sessions about how you do that, what do you do on your first day, what do you do on your first 90 days, things like that. But you're talking to sales, you're talking to people in marketing, you're talking to anyone in the company. You can find out more about the product. You're digging through the customer service records and getting into that. And in a lot of cases, there's some market research that you can tap into, and that actually is sort of an early stage of developing a persona, is understanding the demographics. A lot of times it's prepared for your advertising team, depending on the product that you're working on, and you can start to leverage that when you're building personas, understand the types of people who use your site. And the next step is really to try a variety of methods, and they really are, as I said, going to vary by product. For me, I've done a lot of online surveys, but before TouchTunes, I did a lot of online surveys, did a lot of customer advisory boards, things like that. And at TouchTunes, you get in touch with our venues, one of the many people in our ecosystem. I think I was 2 weeks into the job, going into Memorial Day weekend, and I was just calling up bars to find out how they were responding to a new UI that we had rolled out. And immediately, these key themes will come through. Problems definitely, if you're using the right method, will bubble up. And I had never done a telephone survey before. It was really the only way to really interact with the venues. And I handed over actually to a telemarketing firm, and I actually thought that I was very intimidated by that. I thought I'm going to have to all these scripts. I'm going to need to have all these conversations with them. It actually was really easy to do. The hardest thing probably to do was to set up them as a vendor in our accounts payable system. So it really is about getting your feet wet and jumping into things, and then mixing and matching. There's not any hard and fast rules that you can't mix up a focus group. That generally isn't reviewing a prototype. It's more of an open-ended discussion. But bringing in some prototypes to show them, doing some contextual interviews and following up with an online survey. We'll talk about some of these methods in a little bit, but I encourage you to be experimental with it. So here are some of the actual methods mapped out on the graph that we were looking at a little bit before. The ones that I've highlighted in red, I have some experience before. I have some experience with before. I'm going to remove clickstream analysis and A/B testing from the area of focus today. I think those can be good topics in and of themselves. But you can kind of see how things break down. I will say you probably are generally moving from attitude to behavior as you go through the chronology, but that's not always the case. And I, as I say, encourage you to mix things up. But just to give you a sense of some of the methods, I'm going to jump into some. Now. Contextual interviews are a great one. They're a very big one for us at TouchTunes. And really, you get a lot of qualitative data. You get a lot of seeing what people are actually doing. That's important because as great as surveys are, people are telling you what they're doing, and that's different from what they actually do. But a lot of great insights to be gained from what you actually see in ecosystem. For us, we have a very particular ecosystem, which is generally a bar, often a dive bar. And it's an interesting place filled with TVs and distractions and noise and all sorts of types of social interactions going on. And what we found is that we were actually looking to find out how people decide what to play on the jukebox. We'd always theorized, and we knew internally that that we knew people who did this. There's actually someone using the Spotify app to find the songs that they played recently to play on the jukebox, and that was something that we thought existed, and our hypothesis was confirmed. And we actually are really some more interesting ways for different music services and TouchTunes to work together. But it really gets you into the mindset of these users and understanding the issues that they're facing. Really good feedback to get from contextual interviews. I'm a big fan of that. The program I have at TouchTunes is called Bar Nights, and once a month we're going into a venue that has either our service, like our jukebox, or something similar, either a competitor or another type of product that works in the space, and it's a great source of information. Focus groups. I have a screenshot here from Mad Men. I don't know if that's when it was invented, but it's been around for quite a while. I know at TouchTunes we brought in bartenders and really got a sense of what was important to them as we were developing ways of rewarding them for doing certain activities like promoting the jukebox and helping people out who are trying to figure out if they have any issues using it, things like that. Really good for qualitative data. Here you really are you're getting observed. You're really getting not getting observed data, so you do have to be wary of that. You also have to be wary of some of the group dynamics. If some of these individuals are actually your personas, you can imagine some type of personas would be more easily drowned out. When you do these, I do recommend taking a lot of notes and actually consider taping it. But a lot of good feedback to be gained by the focus groups. Individual interviews as well, sort of a focus group of one. A little bit more, get into a little bit more detail than you can with a focus group. And for me, anytime I'm starting out in an organization, I try to develop a collection of contacts. I call them friendlies, people who you can really bounce ideas off without worrying about them freaking out about how you're designing the product, or that basically it's a trusted environment when you're speaking with them. You can find out different ways to interact with them, whether it's the phone or instant message. But you're avoiding some of the group dynamics. You can really sort of get into the detail, and they can be a little more honest with you than they might be in a group. You sort of avoid the lowest common denominator concept that can kind of dominate a focus group. I'm not too much of a in-depth person when it comes to personas. I think they're a great tool, though. At TouchTunes, we divide between, at a basic level, we do segmentation between a first-time user and a power user. We don't have names for those folks, but there is a lot of value to be gained from that. One of the great things is actually when you come up with a new feature idea, you can find out, like, well, gosh, actually, I can't think that Pete, Jennifer, or Brad would use this feature. And when you come up with a feature, for just one, that's great, assuming they are one of the most valuable personas that you have. But what's even better is when you come up with a feature that actually all the users can use, and that really gives you a sense of like, oh, well, this actually is going to address all three of our major personas. When you develop these personas, and I think if you read the slide, you get a little sense of what they're about. But you do want to base this on actual quantitative data. As I mentioned, we got demographics that were gathered about our users primarily for the purposes of ads. We repurposed that a little bit for personas to get an understanding of our typical user. And you break that down and link it with your web analytics so that, if 70% of your users use search and 30% use browse, you link that back and say, our first-time users are going to use search, and you add that, you link that up with Pete and what he's all about, and really they have to be sort of rooted in reality that way. But a lot of good information, a lot of good perspective to be gained from personas.
And so I'm just going to jump in here, Ian.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Ladislav. Ladislav, I'm going to hand it over to you to ask your question.
Thanks, Jeremy. Ian, my question would be, how many personas are ideal for a product or a feature? Should it be like a couple of, or should be as many as possible? If you can recommend.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good question. I don't think there's a right answer. For me, I know that you really want to address the most valuable personas, and the risk. And this is actually something you can benefit from doing the persona exercises. You can't be all things to all people. So I would imagine anything more than 5, depending on the size of your user base, is really going to be something unmanageable. But I don't think there's a right answer. But I think you really want to focus in on as few as possible. So that's a good question.
And how about marketplaces where you have two types of customer, buyers and sellers? Would you create personas for these two types separately or combined?
Yeah, I would absolutely, and I think for me, having the ecosystem that we have, it can be a lot of work to map out all of that stuff. I think you have to decide whether it's worth doing personas, but I would make one for each user base. Absolutely, very different groups of individuals.
Great. And so as people have other questions, or if you have a new question that comes up as Ian continues his talk, keep them coming in, and you just post them to the productmentor.com/live. It's the productmentor.com/live. As the questions come in, I'll pass them along to Ian in near real time. That said, back to you, Ian.
Okay, excellent. Another method on the docket today, online surveys. I'm a big proponent of online surveys. We do them at TouchTunes. We do that after a user uses a jukebox. At the Associated Press, we did a survey of our user base, which is about 2,000. We got probably 200 responses, so we had actually a good degree of confidence in our answers, and I think that's one of the things to be wary of or to be conscious of is the sample size that you're working with. So as you go through, and I think you want to, what I've found to be valuable is to be consistent, knowing that you're going to be doing surveys down the road, to have a couple of consistent questions, including how satisfied are you with the product? Would you recommend the product to others? I think these are great questions to ask of users. It's great to mix it up with open-ended and closed questions, so they don't have to write a full paragraph with every question, but you do get a little more a sense of what your users are thinking by having them fill in the blank in some cases. It also can be a great recruiting tool for doing in-depth follow-ups in person. So if you can invite people. If you're in the New York area, sign up. You can get a $50 gift certificate for coming in and doing a in-person interview in our office, doing an individual interview. It can be a good tool that way. The survey that I went through earlier was actually an online survey done by an organization that has some product management services. So it can be actually a good sales tool in a way as well. I think it helped them understand more about their user base, and then they sent the survey out to to recruit product managers. It definitely sucked me in. I don't use their service, but I definitely now I'm aware of their product. I would try to keep surveys as brief as possible, and it's great when you have a progress indicator. When I've talked to people in product management, a lot of people use SurveyMonkey continues to come up. And as I said, be conscious of the sample size. So 200 out of 2,000 is not the same as 2 out of 10. Maybe I messed up my math there, but just because it's a certain percentage, wow, it's 10% versus 20%. Well, it really depends on your sample size, whether that's even really meaningful. So I would definitely keep that in mind. You don't have to make the survey as big as possible, but just keep in mind what you have on your hands once you have the data. Another method, card sorting. I haven't used card sorting. I could see some benefit in terms of how we organize our user interface. The idea is to take the different sections that you're going to put in your product and have people put them in the categories. If it's a closed sort, they'll put them in. You've already provided who we are, our purpose, upcoming events, and things like that, and they decide which bucket things go in. In an open sort, they do their own sorting and then add their own label. You can do this in person with pieces of paper. There's some digital tools out there. So an interesting exercise, sort of a classic user research method. Prototyping. I'm a big proponent of prototyping, and really getting it in front of users as quickly as possible, as soon as possible, including if they're low fidelity prototypes. I'm a big fan of Balsamiq, and one of the interesting things about psychology as it relates to tools like that, where it's basically, this actually I think is hand drawn, and Balsamiq mimics the hand drawn look. And that actually is beneficial to your users. They don't view it as being set in stone, and they feel a little more comfortable sharing feedback. And really, again, here the key being doing user research as early as possible. It's a lot easier to crumple this up and draw something new than it is to throw out a code base and tweak a UI. High fidelity prototypes, I've used those as well. In the early stages, we had finalized designs and had not yet coded it. We brought that into a bar, and we really saw what people were first clicking on, and that was good data for us to understand. We knew, since we saw about the same percentage of people going into our search as we had earlier, we had to do a little bit more work on the music programming that we had added to the top of the UI, which is the most prominent thing. So I think I have a slide in here about first click analysis, and it underscores sort of the same idea. But really getting feedback as early as possible. If you're not able to put a low fidelity prototype in front of an actual user or a customer, I would recommend at least recruiting people inside the office to take a look and see if they understand, see what it means. I'm always looking for guinea pigs, and my office has kind of run out of people who haven't already taken a look at some of the ideas that we've come up with. But earlier the better. It's a lot cheaper. Parallel design, a kind of interesting idea. There's some stats that sort of back up this approach as being beneficial to usability. But you're working with multiple designers, and ideally being upfront with them about that to avoid any drama. And then really sort of taking the best of what you see, and then iterating on that design that takes the best of both worlds. Probably working with using designers A, B, and C. And then continuing to work with the best design, but then even if it's let's say it's user B, but then incorporating some things from A and C into the design process. An interesting approach. It's worked for me fairly well. This actually often happens for us, or it's happened for me in the past with the home page, which is the most fraught page. Obviously, a lot of challenges to getting that quite right and getting everyone happy. But taking the best of what you see from different designers can be a good approach. first click testing, this sort of emphasizes some of the stats behind this. If once they click, if they clicked on the right thing, if they've clicked on the right object in your UI, that will take them on the right path to finding out, to solving their issue that they're trying to address, you're going to be in much better shape than if they've veered off in another direction to begin with. And one of the interesting things you can do also is measure how much time it takes them to first click, and then ask them their level of confidence. If it's taken them a very short period of time, it might be because they've just decided they're going to blindly guess, and you ask them, do you think that's the right answer? And they'll say, I have no idea. So there are different ways of measuring it. Again, this graph here makes you keep in mind the statistical significance based on the number of responses that you're getting, or the number of responses you're getting in a particular category. Expert review is sort of a contentious concept in a little ways. Very much can be at odds with usability testing, which says that you really should be putting this in front of a user, and excuse me, and there's no such thing as an expert. And I can see that point of view. I actually think the answer is somewhere in the middle. And I have had a little bit of experience using a usability expert. This is sometimes something you can use as a tiebreaker. But I do recommend vetting the credentials of someone who is an expert in usability and using this heuristic technique. But could be beneficial, especially if you're really worried about if it's keeping you up at night, the quality of the design. The only thing I'll say about task analysis is that it really is interesting to break things down into the subtasks and take a look at what the goal is that you're trying to accomplish and how they actually are going to break that down into the individual components. There's a tendency to oversimplify what people are doing. There's a lot of little steps, and you want to get all of them right. Usability testing, I think this is sort of, for me, sort of like the kid in the candy store, a very anxious moment, but also like a lot of fun to do. When we had a new jukebox, we brought it into a formal usability testing lab, kind of very much like the setup that you see in the lower right. And this was a lot of fun to actually see people use the UI. Of course, I was definitely the guy in the upper right for a little bit of it, but the user is really their responses are really what you need to internalize and respond to, and that was it was great to see actually some success. We actually it was not a prototype; it was actually very much close to finished code for us. We were basically with some things that we needed to work on. It was a success in terms of validating the user experience that we had created, and which is a little nerve-wracking given that we were a little late in the process. But that's because I think we succeeded because we were using a lot of these other techniques as we went along, and the whole process started with the discovery process where the design firm that we're working with spent time with in a lot of our bars and looking at how people use the jukebox, and we tried to address as many concerns as possible. But this is an interesting moment. And we had about 12 users coming in to use the jukebox. People who'd used jukeboxes before, and as they went in, we were using the sort of the giant Post-it notes to write things down. We were tallying it anytime something happened. And one of the tips here, I mean, basically is to think on your feet. We started to see some burning questions that we really wanted to ask. The idea was basically to have a standard set of questions, but you can be flexible with that as well. And we didn't try to be too dogmatic about it. So we started to ask some new questions and got some good insights. But this can be a little bit expensive, but you shouldn't shy away from creating your own system, especially with the quality of cell phone video and everything else. I think you can rig up an outfit that doesn't require the tens of thousands of dollars that it often does to do the more formal, fancy version. Selecting methods is really, obviously an art more than a science. It's one of the biggest challenges. As I mentioned, I would try to do it as early as possible, and I would plan for it and not be afraid to be quick and dirty. To talk a little bit about the process, this is from a company called Frog, who we actually work with on some hardware design. You set your objectives, and what they emphasize is the discipline of actually creating a one-page document that outlines what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that's a good thing to do. One of the benefits being that you can actually figure out if it's an accomplishable goal in your time frame, and maybe that's only a couple weeks or something like that. So really an opportunity to be disciplined about it and figure out what you want to do. And then I mentioned earlier that you want to sort of build a baseline, build an understanding of what what your understanding of the product is. And what you can do from day one is to try to document your hypotheses. We think that users like this. We think that we think that they do this. We think that they use the Spotify app to play music on the jukebox, and we think they would benefit from feature X. And this is really an opportunity to test those hypotheses. And I wouldn't be afraid to keep a big long list of those and think about what you can actually put to the test. As I mentioned, the three big phases for trying out product management, for trying out user research, is when you're early in the process of developing a new feature or product and building a foundation. A lot of times surveys and contextual interviews can sort of help set the base there. And then once you get in the design process, it's very easy to put it off, but you really want to get into, as I say, sharing the prototypes, some of these participatory activities, and then just not really sweat the feedback. It's not about, at that point, especially when you're in the paper prototype and things like that, it's not about refining. It's really about opening up new ideas and being open to responding to what you're finding out from your users. And then, formal usability testing, additional prototyping with more refined designs allows you to work out the details, how things are labeled, and what the nitty-gritty of the behavior is all about. As you are conducting it, as I mentioned, take lots of notes, record it if you can. That said, when we did the usability testing, we had video come back, and we were very excited about that at the get-go. And people didn't watch the video. You're kind of there for the immediate impact, for the immediate study, or not. It's hard to transfer that knowledge. In a lot of cases, you do develop the report, but there's really no substitute for actually being there. I mean, I would say some people watch the video, but it doesn't have legs because the UI has changed and everything else. So you really sort of have to get people there in the moment. As I mentioned, a great opportunity to rally people around. When you're collecting your hypotheses, get them from as many people on the team as possible, and involve them in the process of really setting the goals and share the outcome with them. The outcome, the synthesis, taking a chance to look at what you've learned and put that into a report, and then even keeping track of things like that now you don't know. So the gaps in knowledge that you might have uncovered and you need to research in greater detail later on. That's an important takeaway as well. One concept that I've started to use a little bit at TouchTunes is this responsibility matrix that you see an example of here. The idea being that there's many people who are going to be responsible for actually doing the work. It's definitely a best practice to have only one person who's accountable. In product management, generally speaking, it's great, I think, to have as few people as possible who are consulted, and everyone wants to be consulted. But everyone gets a voice, and you as a product manager make the decision. I read of the concept. I've never tried it. That you only have X number of people who can be consultants, and that's who can be consulted in the process, and that's sort of you can outline that as a policy and sort of point to it, remove yourself from it a little bit and say, I'm sorry, but we can only have 5 people, you can decide who wants to represent from your organization, from your department. In this case, I think opening it up to a lot of people on the consulting basis in terms of the user research that you've done, I think that's a great idea to especially use people from your remote teams and consult them on what you want to find out about your user base, and then also keeping them informed. Product managers, getting back to that survey that we were starting to look at a little bit earlier in the talk, the idea here in terms of why we do it, to help define customer problems and help find the solutions. Those are the two big ones. And you can see some of the methods that people use, in-person interviews being, as I mentioned, one of my favorites, and online surveys being a very popular way, very different type of data that you're getting. I think the market research reports, things like that, are great, but you get more and more removed from it. I don't know if you would call it user research necessarily, but when getting a really good understanding of your users, especially when I was at TV Guide, we became the email customer support team and had very long, I would consider it user research. It just really wasn't customer support. It went beyond that, and we were having very long, several paragraph emails back and forth with a lot of our passionate users, and we really learned a lot. I found that to be a very invaluable method. I don't see it on here, but I think it's a good one.
So we just had another question come in. This one is from Anthony. So Anthony, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hey Ian. So you made a really strong case for user research strengthening the development of a product, and demonstrated a lot of ways where you can get data to validate product decisions. When you see the failed product launches of major companies, presumably they have a ton of resources for user testing to validate things like demand of the product feature set, and that they're not launching it without having that validation coming from that research. What's going wrong there? Like, I guess in other words, what are the pitfalls of product development when it appears that all your user research is validating your decisions?
Right. Yeah. No, I'm gonna get to that in a little bit. I think it's a very interesting question, and I'm going to get to that actually in a little bit. Bear with me actually on that one because I have a slide on that one.
Cool.
Cool. So just everyone else, definitely get your questions in. Now is the time to get your final questions in, and you can submit them to theproductmentor.com/live. And it looks like we just had another question come in. Vikas.
Yeah, Ian, I just wanted to get your thoughts on how do you see the role of product managers relative to user research, wherein you have a UI expert on the team compared to those organizations where you may not have a UI person on the team at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think my experience has been that it's always best to be doing user research in-house. Myself, I don't have a lot of design resources on my team, and when we were developing a new user interface, we were using an outside organization, but I think it really does, it should live with product management. I would work closely with a UI expert that if you did have one on the staff, and I would work with them together on it if that was possible. As I say, I think it's a good opportunity. I think to bring people together. I have some experience a little bit with having an information architect, and I think we can kind of take different approaches. But I think it's great in terms of it's not exactly the parallel design concept, but it's great to compare and contrast the solutions that we're coming up with and work things out that way. So I would just say I think it's a conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Great. And as I said, and if anyone else has any questions, whether you're in the room or joining us from the rest of the internet, you can post your questions to theproductmentor.com/live. And with that said, back to you, Ian.
Okay, great. I'm going to skip over that slide actually and get into having some product managers weigh in, including Michael, who's in the Hangout. Here I'll just say that people come to have a lot of different perspectives on it, and as I say, really the methods vary very much widely, product to product. Michael, I know, uses a service called Envision App to create wireframes and turn them into clickable prototypes. And the idea there is just basically getting on the phone with some of these friendlies or some of these key customers that you feel comfortable sharing with. And Michael, I hope you don't mind me saying that those prototypes are not, you know, the prettiest thing in the world. They're actually a little bit rough, which I think is great. I think that earlier on in the design process that you're sharing with, the more information you're going to get. It takes a little bit of, I think, bravery in some cases, but I think you get great feedback. My friend Obina, who I worked with, really emphasizes really emphasizes the benefit of personas, and really, as I mentioned earlier, targeting the most valuable, because you really can't be all things to all people. And he has a great habit, and this is sort of a theme as I talk to individuals, is of basically creating a habit of for every sprint, including one story that was originating from user research, and being disciplined and having a heuristic that is tangible that way, that you're putting one in every sprint. And his thought is that user research really needs to be done anytime you're messing with the funnel, the core part of your product. It's one thing when you're developing this sort of ancillary feature, you can kind of go, maybe not go with your gut, but you can maybe not do some too in-depth of research to validate it. But when it comes to something that is very much core, user research is essential. I'm also a big proponent of the press release concept of product management. That, you know, for every release that you're doing, that you are writing a press release that explains why it's interesting. He has an interesting take there, which is to write a negative press release. And for me, what that underscores is that, you know, internally people get very excited about redesigns and things like that of their product, and in some cases the core KPIs suffer, and you actually end up, you know, alienating users and things like that. So I think thinking about it, doing sort of a pre-mortem is an interesting concept to practice as well, especially when it comes to how your users are going to react to it. I found it pretty difficult myself to recruit people. My colleague Stephanie at Lionsgate, which is the owner of TV Guide when we were working there, she started a meetup actually that was exactly this idea of helping each other out do user research, so that, you know, if you have 10 people in a room, 1/10 of the time they're looking at your product, and the rest of the time you're looking at theirs and serving as a guinea pig, and doing some usability testing that way. Her meetup actually moved to San Francisco, but it exists. A version exists in New York. It's actually meeting, I think, tomorrow. It's called TestTube, and I think they meet on a regular basis. I'm actually glad to know about that one myself, because I think it'll be a good tool. As I mentioned earlier, when you're doing a survey, SurveyMonkey is one that comes up very popular. Excuse me. And she uses those surveys as an opportunity to recruit in-person participants. This has basically been the standard compensation that I've heard about, which is a $50 gift card for 1 hour of someone's time, including, you know, travel. And she was actually, people are surprised the number of signups that they get, but people are interested in doing this stuff. Her recommendation is basically to build it into the cycle, and to budget for doing research on a quarterly basis, and I literally mean budget. In the case of having you know, annual budget exercises, or what do you have in your organization, really counting on the fact that you're going to be doing some user research, and you're going to require some budget for that 4 times a year. And she also emphasizes, you know, the idea of keeping a running log of the hypotheses that you want to test. So my friend Jen would die, actually, if she knew I was quoting Carly Fiorina. But when I was talking to Jen about user research, she said, and the first thing she said is that customers always tell you what's wrong, and they don't always tell you what they want. And that definitely resonates with me. That's the first thing that bubbles up when you start to get into user research. People are very vocal about what they feel is wrong, and it's really our jobs to figure out what's going to make them, what's going to satisfy their problems, what's going to give them solutions. When it comes to recruiting users, my former colleague Rich has an interesting idea of using even Fiverr to do some of this stuff. Fiverr being a way of getting people to do things that is generally like $5 fee in some cases. So that's the idea that's behind the name. Using Amazon Mechanical Turks, using C-Space to do this. He also amassed his own user community to get people for continual testing. What he thought was the key way to really being disciplined about user research and making the time for it, making it a priority, is to build it into 2-week sprints, and that can be often pretty rapid when you look at that spiral process of conducting user research and creating your one-pager and recruiting people and everything else. But he found it was a way to really make the time. He underscores the rope swing versus tire swing concept. The risk of not doing user research, and it's very easy to deprioritize it, is just to blow the entire investment that you're making in the product by building something that is not really what users want. And Matt, my colleague Matt, who's currently at Marvel, he mentions this idea that these themes come and bubble up fairly quickly, and you find the pain points. But when you are talking about the problems, don't say, what feature should we add? And I mean, you can maybe get some some ideas that may resonate with you, but you want to keep them in user mode and really keeping them out of analytical mode and not make them the product manager. It really is on you to gain insight in terms of what's going to solve their problem, as opposed to having them explain that they would really like feature X or feature Y. That's an important part, I think, to emphasize. A lot of people take surveys more than you would think. I think a lot of people are at their office and bored, and a 10-minute break is something that can be pretty compelling for people, especially if there's a chance to win a gift certificate or something like that. So surveys can be very powerful, and you can build it into the project plan. And he also emphasizes that it's a really good time, as I mentioned earlier, to get the whole team thinking about things and gearing up and getting excited about things as you're getting near the launch. To finally get back to you, Anthony.
We just had a question come in. This one's from Ramsey, and I'll read off the question for you. Ramsey asks, what tools do you use to keep a log of your hypothesis and user research results for posterity?
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for that one. I don't. I don't have anything more sophisticated than Excel, unfortunately. But that's a good question, and maybe that Alpha UX site that actually had the survey. Maybe that's what they're all about, is providing you some tools to do things like that. But I couldn't tell you. Good question. Very good question. Jumping back into things.
Jump back in. That's all the questions we have at the moment. But again, if you have any other questions, you have but moments to get them in, and that's at theproductmentor.com/live. Back to you, Ian.
Yeah. So I would say bias is probably the way I would probably answer the question of Anthony in terms of how people get this wrong. I think you can look at a lot of expensive market research and make the case that the numbers add up a certain way, and in some cases people who don't even have that sort of user research are left to basically, they only have the feedback from users to make a case, and I think it's a tricky question. I don't know how some of these things that are pretty epic failures happen, but I think there's a culture where you really need to deliver it, and people think that it must be right. I've seen products launched time and again that really don't resonate with anyone. And I think sometimes it's just you're not asking the hard questions, and you're sort of avoiding getting the real responses. This cartoon sort of in the upper right sort of underscores that idea. Well, it really is a great idea, right? And I think especially when you're talking to people as a product manager, I know when I go in to a bar, I have to really emphasize. Look, I'd say, which is true. It's almost as if I'm pretending I don't work for the company, but I've been hired to figure out what's wrong with this product, and that really is the way to frame it up, because people will be very complimentary. It's in their nature. Some of the 7 sins of user research. There's a classic example of someone putting out 5 stockings and telling people to say which one they like best, and overwhelmingly they choose option C. And at the end of the day, it turns out all the stockings are exactly identical, and it's really just people. It's the order in which they're presented influences their decision, and you ask them why, and they say, oh, well, this one's thinner, this one is more. I like the color a little better than the other ones, even when they're all identical. And that's the risk of online surveys. We asked our users what they liked most about one of our products that had different types of content, and sports was one of the #1 answers. And we don't have sports content at the moment. We didn't in the test end up having that content running. So you really have to take that sort of stuff with a grain of salt. Dogmatism, thinking about there's only one right way to do research, is definitely a risk. You say, well, you can't do a survey, you're not going to have statistically significant results. Well, you need to establish a ballpark in terms of figuring out what's important to people. It's an iterative process, so sometimes the sample size is not necessarily relevant. I talked a little bit about bias, and really the hardest part, I think, in some cases about user research is really getting the information out to as many people as possible, so that everyone is really understanding what your user base is all about, and not keeping that obscure and keeping that to yourself. It's also very easy to rely on old data. If you're not doing this on a regular basis, you can fall back and you say, well, remember that survey when 20% of the people thought X, and you need to keep these things fresh, and using old data is just going to basically really throw things off as your user base changes and as your products change. Vagueness, I mean, really, when you set those objectives for your user research to be as specific as possible, make sure you're able to do it in the time frame that you're able to do it. And it becomes really about, as they say, learning a lot about a little. And instead of trying to answer too many questions, try to think, you can ask people, what if you could only ask one question? What would it be? I found that's actually a really great tool for engaging with people while user research. You'll get an answer from them. If you ask for your top 10, not everyone's going to respond. But if you ask, what is the one question you could ask a user an all-knowing user, you'll get, I think, a little bit better feedback and engagement. And then the hubris is basically just when you're putting together reports, not to be over elaborate, and not to be excessive in the amount of detail. A user research report is going to be as succinct as possible. But that said, if you avoid those things and really just sort of get your feet wet and try out as many methods and mix and match them together, I think you guys would have great success in building your toolkit.
Great. We just had some questions come in. The first one's from Christine. And Christine says, and I'll tweak the language a little bit. My UX team believes they should conduct user research while product sits on the sidelines during these sessions. Do you believe there is value in both parties engaging the user?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good question, and absolutely. I think this really has to be a team effort, and there's not really time for people to splinter off into different factions, and I think product has to be there. I think that is our role, and so I think that's a good question, and hopefully that answers it.
Hopefully it also settles some debates inside her company as well. Anthony, your question.
Yeah, so this is just a follow-up. I guess first, are there any you know, tips or advice that you have, checks that you can kind of build into your process to avoid the pitfalls, things like confirmation bias?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good question. I mean, for me, I think actually hiring a third party can be pretty powerful. When we work with a third party, even as we were doing that usability testing, we had like about a dozen users come in. I would sort of laugh off some of their problems, and they would sort of give me this look like, that really is a real thing. And I think you can become a little bit callous, and I think having some outside perspective, take a look at it, can help you avoid that bias.
Uh-huh. And also, just as another follow-up, one of the things I kind of struggle with is like, on one hand, you might get the suggestion that, like, let's say you want to add 5 more cup holders to your car, and that's coming, from user surveys or from like a sample group or something, and the intuition is, okay, well, you want to reject some of that advice because, as one quote said, users know what's wrong, but they can't really give you what's right. And at the same time, like, that in itself is almost like an implicit bias, right? That, like, we know better than the user, and I struggle with how that balancing act kind of works.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question. I don't know if I have the answer for that one. I think that's just, I think it's as I mentioned in the beginning, like the user research can provide actionable and testable hypotheses, and I think in that case you can take the 5 cup holder idea and take it back to your user base and see what they think of it. Build a prototype that incorporates that. I mean, I think that it's just the more their value is more in pointing out what's wrong and what's important to them. But I think we have great ideas as well. So I wouldn't completely dismiss it in terms of how you balance it. I guess my answer would be to run it through the cycle and see what some of the other personas think of the idea that some individuals are proposing.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. I think we also just finished up all the different slides there as well. So nice how everything converged together. So again, thank you to our speaker, Ian Moulton, Product Manager at TouchTunes Interactive Networks, for today's discussion on conducting user research. A lot of great examples in this talk. A lot of different things I know a lot of people are going to be able to try. And also, as always, the presentation will be posted to our SlideShare channel. And a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, and everyone else who joined us today, both in the room and on the rest of the internet. And also, don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor, very much like Ian and some of the others joining us along the bottom of your screen, please sign up today at theproductmentor.com. And Session 4 starts November 1st, and we're looking for a lot more great product mentors for that. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board, theproductjobs.com. It's something that we do for members of the product group and the rest of the product management community. And with that said, thanks everyone, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.